Hey, Link here. Thanks for joining me for episode 80, where I speak with Emily Meo. In this episode, we talk about how she got into the industry and some words of wisdom from her experiences, the games that made her want to make games, her favorite games, and what makes gaming enjoyable to her. We also talk about her hobbies outside of gaming and her 2023 Game of the Year. Before we get started, don't forget there are links in the episode description that you can follow to learn more about Emily as well as the podcast. Also, don't forget to like and share the episode, and without further ado, please enjoy episode 80. Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Emily Meo, sound designer that has worked with Edge of Reality, Certain Affinity, and currently Arkane Austin. Hi, Emily. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Really excited to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. I'm glad to hear that you're excited to be here. And you before we started recording, you had mentioned that you were in Texas going through a cold snap right now. So I think we can both share the uh, joy, air quotes, of being in colder. I don't know why I started there. Colder than normal temperatures and having to exist in that. So I'm doing great with that. I hope you are as well.
It's finally soup weather, you know? Like, I spent all of fall being sweaty and miserable, and now I get to. It's finally my turn to wear the big sweaters and make soup and be nice and cozy inside. And that's just very nice. I'm very excited to finally be there because it took us a long time, you know? Like, fall was pretty much summer, the sequel.
So, and then forgive me for thinking this way because I'm up in Ottawa. So for me, we have kind of a clear definition of seasons outside of the fun that is climate change. And also right now the El Nino cycle is really screwing with that in terms of hot and cold and all that fun stuff, which you're experiencing.
Oh, for
But
sure.
I've never really considered that Texas would have soup weather and or a soup season or what have you. And you saying that, I don't know why, but it just makes me happy to hear that you also at least get to enjoy um, some diversity in your seasons, if that
Yeah,
makes any sense.
I mean, we don't get a ton of diversity in our seasons, but we do get something that can technically be called a winter. And it's usually pretty mild, but as we mentioned before, because of El Nino and climate change, very occasionally we do get like cold snaps with snow, and nobody knows how to deal with it because we're all like, the joke is that I think they made fun of this in like King of the Hill, that it starts snowing and then all the cars start crashing into each other because nobody knows how to drive in snow.
So, Emily, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. That's the same here as well.
Oh, is
Um, oh, it's horrifyingly very much the same here. It's just we have more people that know how. So it's a little the scale's not as tipped. Um, but yeah, I hope that when it does get cold or snows a little, as it has been doing for parts of Texas, or I don't know, all of Texas in the last few years, I hope that you guys can at least dodge those horrible drivers because they're not fun.
Yeah, see, our rule of thumb is that the instant that it dips below like 32 degrees and we think there's going to be snow, the protocol is to stay inside. The protocol is to not go anywhere, you know, just like hang out indoors because that's just the safest place to be. It's not worth trying to go anywhere. And uh like it's one thing to be worried about like the other drivers, right? But like, I don't know how to drive on snow either. I don't want to be part of the problem.
So, yeah, I 100% agree with that sentiment. I unfortunately cannot have that same cannot live by that as well just because we have something called winter tires that we're expected to put on our cars and vehicles. So like I
Oh,
very
good
much
to hear.
respect the decision to not go out when it's snowing.
Well, all the better to stay inside and wear sweaters and drink soup.
Yes, exactly. So, Emily, before we get started, if you don't mind, can you maybe tell me and anyone that's listening a little bit about yourself? And if you also want to include like anything about your current projects or whatever else you feel is pertinent to understanding better who you are,
Sure
by all
thing.
means.
Yeah. So, my name's Emily Meo. I'm a sound designer based in Austin, Texas. I work at Arkane Austin, and I'm currently working on Redfall. Always a good time to try out Redfall, but I think recently is the best time of all because we got cool patches and stuff in the works. And and yeah, that's pretty much it. Before I started at Arcane, I used to do like indie games and stuff on the side. I used to do like I was really active in like the local game jam communities. And now I'm in AAA and I can't really do that so much anymore. So it kind of makes my introduction a bit less diverse, I guess. But yeah, that's me. That's where I am.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I can understand when you're working in AAA or any bigger company or what have you, how that can create its own kind of headaches when you're trying to do smaller projects. So, um, I part of me wants to say like hopefully in the future, but at the same time that has its own weird connotation, especially in the current market space. So like,
Yeah, no
uh,
kidding.
I I hope that in some point you might be able to have some balance, I guess. I don't know the right way to say that, but I hope the intent of what I'm trying to
For
say
sure.
is
For
coming
sure.
through.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is that really the restrictions only apply to games stuff specifically. Like I make my own music on the side and release that independently, and that has nothing to do with any game, and that's all fine. They're cool with that.
So that's great to hear because at least there's some aspects of um, uh, downtime hobby. However you want to phrase that,
Sure.
that you can still enjoy, right?
Yeah. In fact, I probably should have plugged that. I have a Bandcamp. If you search for Emily E. Mayo, Mayo spelled Meo on Bandcamp, you will find my work. So feel free to check that out if that sounds interesting to you.
Awesome. And usually this comes later on, and I'll ask for it again later on, and we'll be sure. But that will be in the episode description, so anyone that is curious, they'll be able to check that out on Bandcamp for you.
Sounds good.
So, Emily, I am curious though. Um, can you share how it is you got into doing sound design for games or just sound design in general, and maybe speak to what sound design is? Just because
Oh
there's a
yeah,
lot of titles in gaming or industries in general that have like I don't mean this in a negative way, but have kind of like this generic title, right? And
totally.
depending on the studio you're at it goes any which way, right? So, like, can you maybe speak to how you got into doing this and a little more about what it is you, as a sound designer, does?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we could start with like the history part of it. So growing up, I figured out pretty early that I wanted to work in the games industry, but at the time I was thinking I would work in the games industry as a composer. And I went to classical music school. I got my classical music degree. I had some very interesting ideas about the sort of skills that I would have actually needed to be viable in the industry. A lot of those ideas turned out to be incorrect. But in my senior year of college, I was at so I went to the University of Texas here in Austin, and I was at UT's very first game development capstone class. It was me and another classical music major. We were like the two audio people in that class. And the way that class worked is that everybody was divided into groups, and each group was working on a different game for the entirety of that semester. Because there were only two audio people, we did not have like one group we were in. We were split up between all the groups. So I would do music on one group, sound effects for another group, so on and so forth. We just kind of alternated like that. And the music stuff was all stuff that I had already done. It was all stuff I was used to. But I had never actually done sound effects before. I was surprised that they even asked me to do them. But the idea was that, like, well, you're the audio person, so you can't just do music, you also have to do the sound effects. So I was like, okay, cool. I guess it's time to learn how to do this. And I happen to have like a little AT 2020 USB mic. Very very basic, but you know, USB mics now and even back then were getting pretty good. Um so I just like recorded a bunch of stuff in my apartment. I went out and recorded some stuff in other places too. And it's a very common story for composers to dip into sound design because they want to grow their skill set professionally. Um, but there's a lot of composers who do that because they feel obligated to, and they don't necessarily have an affinity for sound design. Maybe they don't even like doing it. Um, and lucky for me, I liked it. I had a lot of fun with it, and you know, I mean, I still loved music and still pursued that in my own way. But um, but it was kind of at that moment that I realized, like, oh well, but I could also do this other thing and also have a perfectly good time doing it. So um, so that was just like another thing to pursue. Shortly after I graduated college, um, I kind of stumbled into my first games job by accident. It's actually a very funny story. I was working at a bad Italian restaurant chain as like a server, host, delivery driver combo, and they asked me to come in on my day off to do a big delivery, like a big catering delivery. And I was like, "Oh, I don't really want to come in on my day off. Can't somebody else do it?" And my manager was like, "Oh, but Emily, it's at a game studio. The delivery is to a game studio, and that's something that you care about, right?" And I was like, "Dang, you're right. I do care about that." So I came in and I delivered food to Edge of Reality, and I did not know this at the time, but at the time, they were trying desperately to wrap up development on Transformers: Rise of the Dark Spark. They were only a few months from launch, and they were crunching like crazy, and they only had one audio person in the studio. I didn't know that at the time that I walked in. But I walked in, and it was the first time I had ever been in a AAA studio, and I was starry-eyed, and I hated my Italian restaurant job so much that when they signed for the food, I asked if they were hiring for any audio positions, and the producer handed me his business card, and he was like, "Well, I don't know, but send us your resume, and we'll pass it along to our audio guy." And I did. I did do that, and they passed it along, and then I was working there a month later.
So that thank you for sharing that. And that's um I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase all of this, just because like that's a really weird stroke of luck, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I always tell people, like I've still been in contact with UT, and I've like, you know, I've spoken at events, and I've like mentored some of the kids there. And I always tell them the story, and I'm like, "Okay, listen though. It's a funny story. It's not advice. You probably can't replicate this. Do not try to do this." Like I could have gotten in really big trouble if they had gotten mad at me and complained. You know, I could have lost my bad restaurant job, you know?
And, luckily you well, technically you did lose that bad restaurant
Well,
job,
yeah,
but
and I
on
mean,
your
not
terms,
wrong.
right?
Yeah, that was the best case scenario for losing the bad restaurant job. At least I had a say in it.
um, but no, that's a fantastic and funny story, just because, like I said, like the stroke of luck that it was, and that it worked out, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, anyone that um works in like an industry that is largely driven on doing like artsy stuff, quote unquote, because
Sure.
there's a whole umbrella term. I'm sure there's a better term for it. But a lot of that is not like it's not something you can just demonstrate on paper, right? Like if we're
Mhm.
programming or something, you can just be like, yeah, I have 5 years experience doing X, 5 years of experience doing Y. And that typically gives an idea of experience. Whereas, I'll use me as an example. I can say that I have several years of experience doing audio stuff. It's not anything extensive. It's not anything in depth. And if anyone with like, if you were to ask me questions, I would have no idea how to answer them. Right. So like on paper, artsy kind of stuff doesn't translate as well as other things. So you know. Uh, you very lucky that they called back and like that worked out for you, and putting yourself out there uh also paid off, and
Yeah,
yeah, so I don't know where I'm trying to ramble with this one. Sorry.
no worries, man. I mean, you're right though. It was kind of an insane stroke of luck, and my portfolio at the time was really just those little games that I had worked on at UT, and I think it's mostly just that um, a lot of the work that still needed doing at the time was like a lot of like it was things a lot of things that had to do with bugs and implementation. And it was less to do with like the quality of the sounds that I was actually making. And and I think they just kind of like looked at me and was just like, okay, well she's got some gumption. We'll teach her some Unreal 3 basics and we'll have her help out with getting the rest of these sounds hooked up and ready to go. And it was a great experience. It was a short experience because it was a pretty brief um contract, but I learned a ton. And what I especially learned at that job was all the stuff that I didn't know, all the stuff that all the skills that I would need in order to have a career in this field, but I didn't have yet. I knew how to write a pretty good string quartet, but I didn't know how a compressor worked. I didn't really understand signal chain. So what happened is when my contract ended, I took a break from attempting to have a career in games, and I took a year off to study audio engineering at Austin Community College. And Austin, we call ourselves the live music capital of the world, and our community college it is pretty much run by local Austin music professionals, and it's taught by like people who do live sound downtown, and people who are recording albums, and it was just a really good place for me to be to actually learn, um, to like gain a really solid foundation of audio engineering and synthesis, and even just like the basics of how MIDI worked. Um, so that was really really helpful. And after my year there, I was able to get a job at a casino game company called Every, and I worked there for 5 years, making sound effects and doing music. It was nice to be able to do both, but I didn't really want to be in casino games forever. I only ever considered it a stepping stone towards what I really wanted to do, and what I really wanted to do was work in AAA. And I had a hard time finding AAA jobs. It's just really, really difficult to find like junior level audio roles. Because the thing about Every, like, yeah, I spent 5 years there, and if I had spent 5 years at a AAA studio, then that would make me eligible for like mid or even senior positions. But because it was a casino game company, not all of that really transferred. Not all the skills really, really transferred. Um, but what happened is, well, the pandemic happened, and a lot of casinos shut down, and Every ended up laying off like, oh, I want to say like half of their workforce. And I was in those layoffs, but it worked out because Certain Affinity picked me up like immediately. They gave me a contract. I worked on a project so secret that I'm pretty sure I can't talk about it, but learned a lot. Good experience. And then after that, I started up a contract at Arkane, and then Arkane took me on full time, and that's where I am now.
So, I'm happy to hear that all of that, like the connecting dots in the past for this has worked out for you just because, you know, why wouldn't why shouldn't I be happy that this has worked out, right? I think a better way to phrase that story is why shouldn't I be happy that someone is getting to do what they actually want and enjoy and feel fulfilled with?
Oh, for sure.
Um,
And I got really lucky because I know um I know a lot of people are getting laid off in the industry these days, and even when I was at Every, um the industry didn't always feel super stable, and I was always like, "Oh god, what if I get laid off? What if I get laid off? What am I going to do?" And then I did get laid off and it turned out totally fine, but I understand um how rare that is, how unusual that is. My circumstances were very specific, and I also was like in a job that I was ready to move on from in the first place, which softened the blow, as you can imagine. But, a lot of people who have gotten laid off lately, not that lucky, you know?
yeah, exactly. And so now, Emily, the a weird bridging point from this one. Um, Not to dismiss the unfortunate nature of the industry right now with I don't even know how many it's been, and we're 20 days into 2024, and
Yeah, it's
like
like
Embracer's shut down
thousands
like yeah, like
already.
six like yeah, like Embracer's shut down like a whole studio. They're probably gonna shut down some more. Other ones are laying people off. It's a really unfortunate time, and not to dismiss that or move on from it without acknowledging it. Um, However, I I want to try and keep the focus on you and something more positive than
Oh, for
the
sure.
hellscape that is the current workforce world in general right now.
For sure.
Um, so I am curious, and you had said that when you give your kind of like walkthrough to people um like how you got into where you are or what you're doing, that it's not advice. So this is going to be a little weird, but do you have any advice or words of wisdom
Oh,
that
yeah,
you can actually share from
I
your
totally do.
experience?
I totally do. So this is especially geared towards like audio folks. If there are any audio folks listening to this who are, up and coming, early career, maybe you haven't gotten your big break yet. Uh, I'd say like the biggest thing is that um, you have to be kind of a self-starter. You have to be really like motivated to make stuff and do stuff. Even if you're having trouble finding projects, you just kind of always need to be um, working on something and then showing it off, because that's how you're going to get better, and that's how you're going to get people to find you. And like it sucks because it's essentially a lot of like unpaid labor that you're doing for yourself, but it really is the only way. You have to work on your own demo reels, making your own sound redesigns and doing all of that until you start getting paid work that you can use for future demo reels showing off professional work. It just there is an upfront labor amount that sucks, but you got to do it. It's just something that you can't skip if you want to get into the industry, because so much of this is about what you're doing, how you're doing it, the quality of the work, um, and just like really building those skill sets and getting them as strong as you can.
So thank you for sharing that. And as you were sharing that, wow, sorry, I'm going to be stuck on the word sharing now. While you were sharing that, it was reminding me of something that a previous company I worked at, what they used to say, and I hated it, and it was very much the same advice that you gave, but I hated it for a different reason. And their reasoning was if you wanted to get a promotion, um, you should, after hours, try and work at the role inside the company that you would like to be promoted to. So let's say you were support, and they would say if you wanted to move into the web support group, you should be doing unpaid time for web support,
Oh,
effectively doing free labor for them.
I
And
hate
I, yes, I hated it too for the same, like it was support for them. However, the way you phrased it, how you're doing work for yourself, I love that because that's, it's the same kind of advice, except you're not paying into someone else's capitalistic
exactly.
hellscape. You're paying it to
Exactly.
yourself.
Like you always hear people saying like never work for free, and I generally agree with that. Generally, I do think that there's a little bit of nuance here. I think it's okay to do some work for free, assuming that the people that you're working with are not making any money off of this with you. You know, it is as unpaid for them as it is for you. However, you should never do unpaid labor for somebody else who is profiting off of your work, you know? Like you got to work out like some kind of profit share, some kind of anything, cuz uh that's really where the exploitation happens, you know? But if you and your buddies are making a game in your spare time for free and you're just gonna like put it up on itch.io, then yeah, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I have two backgrounds, programming and design. The design one is very stagnant. However, anyone that's kind of curious about how you can bridge something like this, I'm going to encourage you, and even if it's, it's not just related to design. This is something that can be transferred to any kind of contract based thing. Just go into YouTube and Google, or go into YouTube and search up "you pay me."
Oh
Um,
yeah.
there's gonna be a beep there. I'm aware of that, but yeah, anyone listening can figure out what that word should be. But if you just search that, you're gonna find like a 15 or so minute talk from someone who runs through in a nice set of detail and everything about why it's important to not work for free. And I just think that's relatable and on topic
Mhm.
to what you're saying. And the nuance, as you said, where if you are working towards something for free with other people that aren't being paid, or like a game jam or something, like obviously most game jams um
If not
are
all
meant
of
for,
them, then you're
sorry.
definitely unpaid.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
saying most, if not all of them. I
yeah,
can't think of any
but
game jams that would pay me.
most of them are for self-betterment, right? Like it's meant to be something that you do because you
Totally.
want to improve or you want to network or what have you.
Yeah.
And the nuance there for free labor is, in my mind, it falls into that what you said, where you're working for yourself. You're just working for yourself with other people with a common goal, right?
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Uh,
I we got on a tangent and I forgot to actually describe what my job actually is. Um, so I make sound effects that can entail either me recording sound effects or I can take sounds that other people have recorded and edit them to create new composite sounds. Or I could take a synthesizer and make sounds with that. Um, and so in the audio field, we also have like I'm a sound designer, right? But we also have a term called technical sound designer, and technical sound designers take those sounds and they focus on implementing those sounds into the game. So we have like a special role title, the technical sound designer, that does that. However, so I work on a pretty small sound team, and so what typically happens on teams of that size is that we're all implementing everything ourselves. So I'm not only responsible for creating the sounds, I'm also placing them in the game and mixing them accordingly, making sure everything sounds cool. So what's fun about that is that I'm not only thinking about like the sounds in terms of content, I'm also thinking about the sounds in terms of like systems. Um, like systems of sound, the way that sounds can interact with different gameplay situations, or even the ways that sounds can interact with other sounds. Like for example, like if you have like a sound in an environment of like a flag flapping on a flagpole, you want it to flap harder when there's stronger wind, right? So you could set it up so that if the wind is strong, it plays louder flag flaps, and then if the wind isn't strong, you only get like the occasional little flutter instead. So yeah, that's pretty much my job. I also get to do music stuff. I did quite a lot of music mixing and implementing for Redfall. That is not always a part of a sound designer's job, but again, if you work on a small team, it just means that you get to wear a lot of hats, and I feel pretty lucky that I get to occasionally put on the music hat and mix and implement cool music.
So, thank you for sharing that. And I'm happy to hear that you also get to like kind of, I'm presuming, reach back into what you originally went to school for,
Oh yeah.
and get to like implement or work with that moving forward too. Because, it's always nice when you can kind of pull out your other kind of knowledge or talents or what have you and like find a home for them.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's also nice to have different things to do every day. If you're on like a really big sound team, like I don't know, if you're working at like a really huge studio making like extremely uh wealthy games, or you're making games with that are backed by, a ton of money, and you're on like a 10-person audio team, things are going to get a bit more like granular. You might have somebody who only does dialogue editing. You might have somebody who only does implementation. You might have somebody who only does music. But we all get to do a little bit of everything. And honestly, that's more fun for me.
and that's great to hear. And as someone that has been working on, in my professional life, has been working on like the same project for over a year now, 100% understand and agree with what you're saying. Because yeah, um, it gets exhausting
Yeah, totally.
very quickly. So, Emily, I am curious though, because you had mentioned that when you were um, working at the crappy Italian job, and then you went back to school, you were it was for game related um, uh, sound stuff. I apologize, I didn't write down the exact term
It's okay.
for the
Um,
program.
It was audio engineering, but I did also take a programming class and a game design class. Like it wasn't like a specific program so much, it was me just like taking any class that seemed relevant to what
Okay,
I wanted to
so
do.
thank you. So like obviously that all didn't come created in like a vacuum. So I'm wondering, were there any games that made you say like when you were younger or when you were older or what have you that were like, this is what I would like to do. This is what I want my future to be. And if there were, what games were they?
Sure, absolutely. So I thought about this one for a bit, and like this has to be my answer, but it is my answer with me fully knowing that like probably you have heard this answer 100 freaking times because it's Ocarina of Time, obviously. I'm a 90s baby. Uh, Ocarina of Time was very important to me as a child. Um, Obviously, it has great sound effects, but what was really getting me at the time was the music. And it's one thing for it to have good music. Obviously, it has good music, but because of the ocarina, it has like music that you yourself are contributing. It's like a very direct musical interaction with the game in a way that we haven't really seen since. And and it felt impressive at the time, and looking back it still feels impressive, because like how many games have managed to pull that off again, they haven't. It just it has not been done. Um, but in addition to the music, I really loved how the world felt. Um, Now, obviously, this is a bit dated now. Came out in 1997. Um, there were limitations. But at the time, and considering the limitations, the world felt very, it felt lived in and it felt thought out. And I really loved just like going around and talking to all of the characters and just like really immersing myself in um in the world as it was. And yeah, I loved that so much that it broke my brain and now I'm a game developer.
So, thank you for sharing that. And, you know, uh, there have been a lot of people that have cited Ocarina of Time in some way or another, but also far be it from me to ever shun that kind of talk. Because, I also being a 90s kid who I'm going to say Ocarina of Time was my 3D game awakening, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Um, just because, like, that was the first game that I, as like, I don't know, a 12-year-old or something in 1997 or 98, whenever I first tried it at like the Toys R Us demo thing,
Mhm.
that I realized a game could feel immersive. Um, so like far be it from me to ever stick my nose up at someone citing Ocarina of Time or just any of like or Majora's Mask or what have you, right? Because
Mhm.
they were fantastic games that did a lot of things very, very well. And yeah, right? Like, you mentioned the freedom of making your own sound. I remember going online and finding like the the C face buttons, and then the joystick angles you had to press to like redo popular songs or like
Yeah.
cartoon intros. So
Yeah.
like that's something that's never existed since, and
I
it's
know, we just like
wild that that
totally haven't.
existed.
So, okay, so I feel like I do need to shout out one game that I haven't played it myself, but um did include like a fully playable instrument that I know that people have been like doing covers on. Uh the playable guitar in The Last of Us 2. I feel like I need to give a shout out to that because okay, one other game did it. One other game did it. But maybe if The Last of Us 2 had Ellie going around and using the guitar to solve puzzles and interact with different characters and unlock things, you go around, you kill some zombies, you find a locked door, you whip out your guitar, you play a little song. Maybe if The Last of Us 2 was more like that, I would have played it by now.
There's always a chance that HBO will put that for season 2, right? Maybe that will be the
Yeah,
big
HBO,
twist that they
you
put.
can have that idea for free, HBO, please. Please.
Have her solve instead of it being all violence, have her solve some of her conflict with with Battle
the
of the Band
the
style.
power of music, you know?
Yeah. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but take some chances, see what happens, right?
Oh, you know what? I also have to shout out, oh gosh. Oh, I cannot be blanking on the name. There was an indie game that came out a few years ago. It featured a happy bard that sings and you like sing little songs with the bard and you can make him dance and you save the world and it was so good. It was such a good game. And uh the Shell in the Pit, which is a audio um a freelancing audio house, they did the sound for it. And God, why am I blanking on what it is called? I'm gonna like search like indie game with bard. Wander Song. Wander Song. Okay, I gotta give a shout out to Wander Song because that is also a game that did the Ocarina of Time thing and they focused in on it so hard that that's pretty much the whole game, and it rules. So, if you out there are a person who really loved Ocarina of Time's playable Ocarina, and you kind of want to scratch that itch, I think Wander Song is a great way to do it.
So, thank you for that. I wrote that down. I'm going to look into it. I wouldn't be shocked if it's, sitting in a wish list somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
Um, but I am going to look into it more because that is I didn't realize if this is the first time I'm hearing about it, that's a cool hook. If it's something that's been sitting in a wish list, that sounds like a much better reason to push it up the list. You know what I
For
mean?
sure, yeah.
Uh, so Emily, I am curious. I do want to ask this. Now, before we started talking, you had mentioned that, the favorite game is a hard question to answer. And I 100% know that. And I do want to make it clear that I always kind of feel bad for asking this. However, it's like such a staple thing to ask to people that play games. I'm not going to subject you to it though, since you already said that's such a hard thing to
Well,
answer.
I mean, yeah,
Uh,
it's hard to answer, but the reason it's hard to answer is because like there have been a lot of games that I really love, but they are so different from each other that it's difficult to compare. Like, okay, so like for example, when I was like 12 years old, I was a Nintendo kid growing up, right? But when I was 12, I went over to a friend's house and we played through the first few hours of Final Fantasy X on her PS2. And I thought that was the most beautiful, most perfect game I had ever played. And eventually I got my own PS2 and I played through it and loved every minute. And I think it's my favorite Final Fantasy to this day. It's probably amongst my favorite RPGs to this day. Does that make it my favorite game of all time? Well, I don't know. I mean, Ocarina of Time also like means a ton to me, and I go back to it every year, um and I just like never get tired of it. But like I just come to it for a different thing, you know? Um like Prey. Like I did not work on Prey. I feel like I need to say this. I do work at Arkane Austin. I did not work on Prey. Like I love Prey. I recently replayed it and it still felt like every bit as like fresh and relevant and fun, and like when it was over, I was like, "Oh man, I can't believe that there's I I I guess I could just start over, you know?" Like I'm not ready for it to be done. Does that mean it's my favorite? I don't know. I don't know. I just have different favorites for different situations.
And that is the problem with the question, right? Because like there are definitely some people that they can stake a favorite game and it will be their favorite game their entire life. Um However, like different periods of your life um or what have you are why that's a hard question to answer because like you touched on it, Final Fantasy X being your favorite RPG, um like Prey being one of your favorites, but like or Ocarina of Time being one of your favorites because of what it inspired or made
Yeah,
you realize, right? But like that's why I say I always feel kind of bad for asking it because I know inherently how hard it is to try and be like, well, what's your favorite game? It's like, well, like I think the best way to put it, and this scene has always stuck with me in I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Pilgrim.
Oh,
Um,
I'm familiar.
Awesome. So this will probably ring a little truer to you. When Knives Chow is I don't remember if it's in the graphic novel, but in the movie it definitely is, where she sits down next to him on the couch and he's playing a DS or something, and she's watching everyone else play music and she goes, "So what is it that you play?" And he goes, it's like a heavy sigh and goes, "Oh, that's I don't know how to answer that." And it's it's because like it's because the context is like he's, a big gamer. And it's like, how do you answer your favorite game when you've been playing games your whole life and different times mean different things, right? So like that's why I know it's a hard question to answer. I'm still gonna ask it to people, don't get
For
me
sure.
wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think
But
you can still like learn a lot about a person by like asking, even if that answer is, man, I don't know, you know?
Yes, because like you touched on, Final Fantasy X. I imagine it would hold a special place in your heart because you enjoyed the time that you got to play it with your friend, and then when you got it, the time you got to then talk to about it with your friend,
Oh,
which is
totally.
very different than Ocarina of Time, which is very different from Prey, right? So
Mhm.
like, you know, it's a very valid question, and you do learn a lot about people. It's just a mean question in the nicest way possible, and I'm aware of that.
Sure, sure.
Um, However, with that in mind, because we did speak a little about your favorite game, I am going to ask though, what is it that makes games enjoyable to you? Because we've talked about a few different games, but I imagine there's a few different things about that that could make them enjoyable.
Absolutely. So I'd say the biggest, most obvious thing, I do like it when a game has good audio. It is not necessarily like I've played some games with um even a game with less good audio, if it can hook me in other ways, then I'm gonna get hooked, you know? I am a big sucker for a good story. I love I'm one of those people who's, really big into the first uh single player narrative experiences. And I'm not much of a multiplayer gamer. I never have been. So I like good story, also like good characters. I like good character interaction. I tried to play Octopath Traveler, and uh and I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is great. It's all about it got all these stories and it's got all these characters." But I eventually ended up bouncing off of it because none of the characters like really talk to each other. They don't really bond or change each other. They just kind of have their own little like self-contained story. So I guess that's like a thing that I had never really thought about, but it made me realize how much I really value in if I'm playing an RPG. Like I want my characters to be interacting, I want them to be bouncing off each other. I just think that's just more interesting to me. Um Beyond narrative, um I like well-designed systems. There are games that are a bit more narrative light that just have really good systems um, that I will, play and spend time with. I think Into the Breach is a really good example of this. It's just like a really beautifully designed game that I spent a lot of time with and really, really enjoyed. But I mean, yeah, it has a story, but it's really more about the mechanics. And another thing that I like to see in the games that I play, and this is something that especially now that I work at Arkane has become very important to me, is room for emergent gameplay. Room for a player to have a totally individual experience using the mechanics available to them. Um, Trying to think of like a good example of that. I mean, I think well, I don't
You could just use Prey. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
I was like, "Can I think of one that, like, isn't an arcane game?" And, like, I can, but Prey does it so well, you know?
So, thank you for that. And yes, I understand completely. Because it's it's good to have it's good to have story. It's good to be able to enjoy what you're doing, but I also get that you want your characters to actually exist in like the same world.
Mhm.
Um, which I think Octopath Traveler 2 kind of addressed. I can't speak to that for like actual
Yeah, I've actually heard that Octopath Traveler is, like the Octopath Traveler 2 specifically is ridiculously good. Like, it doesn't seem like a ton of people in my circles played it, but the ones that did, like, really, really love it, and I do plan to give it a shot, you know?
Yeah, and it's I kind of I'm in the same boat. It's just as I think you and probably many others can relate to. the backlog is always growing,
Yeah,
and
oh,
it's
it
a
sure is.
hard thing to climb. Um, so, so Emily, I do want to ask this. I'd be remiss if I did not ask this, especially, on the talk of backlogs and things that help keep it growing.
Mhm.
Outside of gaming, what is it that you enjoy doing? What is it that you do to relax or what have you?
Sure. What's really funny about this question to me is that gaming is like primarily how I relax. Like if I don't have anything else going on and I'm just like, oh man, I'm like tired. I want to like just relax for a bit. I put on a game. But the other stuff that I do that is not games. I read a lot of comics. Uh, I'm a big manga fan. I just got an iPad for Christmas so I can read like the Shonen Jump app on like a nice big screen. It feels very luxurious. Um and yeah, just like I got the DC Infinite app so I can read through some, Batman, some classic Batman. And yeah, I'd say if it's not games, it is a good comic.
So, two things with that in mind, because I'm going to bounce this off of you and then, start the process of letting you get out of here. As you said, you had things to do this afternoon, and I don't want to keep you from them. So, two quick ones before we start doing the wrap up.
Sure thing.
You talked about gaming being the thing that if you're tired, you just want to do. Real quickly, what is your go-to game that you are playing right now to help you relax?
Oh, right now? Well, uh it's not so much that I pick the games that I think will relax me, but I do think that this game is I mean it's relaxing because it's just so fun. It's Baldur's Gate 3. I know, like everybody's playing it right now. I was a little late to the party because I was just like playing through other games in my backlog at the time. I really wanted to get through Final Fantasy 16 and then I wanted to replay Prey, and anyway, I finally got to Baldur's Gate 3. I'm in Act 3. I'm actually kind of coming up on the end, and I'm having such a wonderful, wonderful time with it. I'm thrilled that it got made. I'm thrilled that it blew up the way it did, and I'm excited for like the future of RPGs like this, of CRPGs like this. Now that um now that Baldur's Gate 3 has just exploded in the way that it did.
Yes, I understand what you're saying because like it as someone who has played several of Larian's games and from what I've played of Baldur's Gate 3 so far, it feels like a very nice handle on everything they've learned from their previous games. And if people haven't played or if you haven't played like Original Sin 1 and then Original Sin 2, there was a very different shift in them. Where, in my opinion, Original Sin 1 kind of took itself way too seriously, and Original Sin 2 kind of overcompensated by not having as much seriousness in it.
Mm.
Um, Baldur's Gate 3 feels like they've kind of found the good needle point for it on like a general basis, if that makes sense. Now I'm only
I
in
think that's
Act 1, so
absolutely. Oh yeah, no, sorry. You go.
oh, I was just saying I'm only in Act 1, so I don't know how I can't speak beyond that, but
Well, I think that you raise a really really good point. I haven't played Original Sin 1 or 2. However, one thing that has really struck me about Baldur's Gate 3 is that it it absolutely has like moments of darkness. It is absolutely dealing with, some heavy topics, and sometimes uh you're in a cave and there's like dismembered corpses everywhere, and like that's some really edgy stuff, you know? But at the same time, when you think about Baldur's Gate 3, you're not necessarily thinking about um how dark it is or how serious it is. You're thinking about like the companions that you like, and you're thinking about like maybe the beautiful environment art, or you're thinking about like um how you can make Karlach throw barrels at people, and it's hilarious. Um, I feel like if you come to Baldur's Gate 3 and you want to do dark and you want to do edgy, it gives you everything you need to do that. But Dark Urge, a great example of that. But if you want your Baldur's Gate 3 experience to be like the best friends forever hotties club, then you can do that too, you know?
Yes, I understand what you're saying there. And the other quick one, if someone, gun to your head, weird, always a weird expression or what have you, but gun to your head, if someone said, what comic or what manga should someone check out? Go.
Okay. A comic that I'm really, really into right now is called Witch Hat Atelier. It is about a little girl who really wants to become a witch, and she joins like a little witch educational coven situation. And it is about like I think 10, 11 volumes right now. And I think it's like it's a really good like all ages book. Like you could give it to a child, you could give it to a teenager, you could give it to an adult. And all of those age groups are going to find something to love about it. The art is so gorgeous to look at, and it is not afraid to deal with like complicated philosophical questions. It's not afraid to like have the characters grapple with an impossible problem with unsettling implications. But it bends much more towards the light than towards the darkness, and I just think it's a wonderful book, and I would recommend it to anybody.
So thank you for that recommendation. I wrote it down. I'm going to look at it myself. Now, Emily, as I said, I do want to help you get out of here. I do want you to get on with your day, not, have me steal too much more time. So if there wasn't anything else you want to discuss or a cool game or
I have
wow,
one
sorry.
thing. I have one thing.
Cool.
One thing that I wanted to be sure to shout out at some point was that so yeah, like a lot of people have like towards the end of 2023 and even like earlier this month, a lot of people have been like, "Oh, these are my top 10 games of 2023." And look, I get it. I get it. A lot of games came out in 2023. And I also, yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and that's on the top of everybody's Game of the Year list, and I absolutely understand that. I'm not saying it's not deserved. However, my Game of the Year, I feel like I don't see anybody talking about it. So I really feel the need to shout out the System Shock remake that came out, I believe, in the spring of this year, of last year, rather. I played it having not played the original. And at the time I was just like, oh well, this was like the one of the very first immersive sims, and I work at the immersive sim factory, so I should probably play System Shock and see what the fuss is about. And that game took me by the throat. I played 33 hours in 3 days, and I loved it so much. And the experience of playing it was like I felt like the game was holding me gently in its hands and telling me, hey, I'm gonna ask some pretty gnarly stuff of you. I'm gonna ask you to do some pretty difficult things. But you're going to find, if you put forth just a little bit of effort, you're gonna find what you need to persevere. And I did. And I just thought it was like a really wonderful game. And also like one to bring up Prey again. So Prey is obviously well, I don't know how obvious it is. Have you played System Shock?
I have tried to play System Shock 2. The
Oh, the
controls
original?
defeated me.
Oh
So
yeah, no, play the new one. Play the new one. Yeah, you don't have to worry about that with the new one. The new one fixed it for you. But System Shock is very much like you wake up on a space station, everything's gone wrong, and you gotta go figure out what happened and fix it. And Prey is very much the same thing. It's a game that is absolutely like in conversation with System Shock. So what the System Shock remake did is so Prey had a recycling system where you could like pick up objects and then go to the recycler and recycle them, and you could turn them into like resources that you could turn into items. System Shock continued the conversation between System Shock and Prey and added a recycling system to their remake. And I just thought that was just like, now we're getting into like homages within homages. And I just think that's so great.
Yes, I don't disagree that getting to see games that are coming out that see games paying respects to them, realizing that they can take from them and grow as well using those new ideas. That's a weird way to put it. The best way I can put it is when you look at something like Harvest Moon, now Story of Seasons.
Mhm.
After Stardew Valley came out, that the developers there went, oh crap, we can do some neat stuff like this too, and like took from there and grows together.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and that's a fantastic thing when you get to see it and it works, right?
Mhm.
So, Emily, as I said before, I do want to let you get out of here. Not to discourage talking more about Prey or video games. You had said you had plans, and I don't want to
For
encroach
sure.
on
Yeah, no,
those plans.
I appreciate it.
So not so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. However, if there's anything else you want to throw out there, cool game, what you're doing, something you feel more people should just be more aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. Also, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you, which I'll also be including in the episode description along with your Bandcamp link.
Oh, for sure.
Other than that, though, by all means, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, go play System Shock because I think it's really good. If you want to find me elsewhere on social media, I am usually just Emily E. Mayo everywhere. Twitter, co-host, technically Blue Sky, but I haven't posted there yet. I'm not as active on social media as I used to be, but eventually I'll have to get back in there. I have a Bandcamp page, as I mentioned before. Last year I released a sort of like experimental drone EP called The 11th Night. But I've also done more conventional poppier synth stuff. So, if either of those sound good, go check it out. And also, shout out to Redfall, game that I've been working on for the past 3 years, game I'm working on now, and, has a special place in my heart. And I think that's pretty much it.
Awesome. So, like I said, if that was it, I will let you get on with your day, and thank you so much.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
So thanks again to Emily for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Road Steep. And be sure to check out the episode description for links to socials, websites, and other means that allow you to learn more about or support Emily and the podcast. While you're doing that, share, like, follow, whatever else you think makes it linger from work, and thanks till next time.